was supposed to do. Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Roundup. I am your usual host, David Fox. With me, as usual, is my co-host, UberHansen. With me, not as usual, but very happy to have him here, is the wonderful, immaculate, yet ever elusive Bruce Nolan. I say elusive just because you're completely anonymous, and that kind of makes it seem like you're kind of like a spy trying to keep your identity, in check. So, yeah. Anyway, Bruce, happy to have you on the show, buddy.
Happy to be here. I do think that you just gave me an idea. Maybe it's the Bruce elusive instead of the Bruce exclusive. Right? I mean, I'm not verified on Twitter, which means technically I can change the handle. I don't think my brand is so significant that it can't survive a
for sure
change.
I mean, and it's like just a few letters. It's really just taking out two letters. Exactly. So it's not that far off. I'm just saying.
We could go there. I think we could make it happen. Bruce elusive. I think it works.
Bruce elusive. I will be asking for not a lot of royalties from that, but at least something here and there if that's where you go to.
For sure. If you get a nickel every time someone says it, you're gonna have at least 15 or 20 cents. I mean, I know penny candy isn't quite a thing that it used to be, but we could find a way, to make it work.
We'll make it work. We'll make it work. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. Very happy to have you. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Bills offense. Last week we talked about the Bills defense. You, Bruce, actually talked about the Bills defense on a different show on Cover One, so I figured why not bring you in to do offense while we're doing offense. So I'm happy to have you here. Before we get any further, though, we have some business to take care of, and before we do that, we have to do our usual check-in. We don't have to, but it's a good host thing to do. So first, Uber, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I feel like I've been fighting the good fight all day on Twitter about a thing I'm passionate
You always do, unless it's Trevor Lawrence. Then I just kind of have to stay silent so I don't publicly assault you.
We don't need to talk about him today. But yeah, no, fighting about Josh Allen and how I literally do not think people appreciate nearly enough what he's done the past 4 seasons with this whole 40 touchdown streak. And the more and more I look into it, the more and more research I do on it, the more and more I'm stunned about how good he's been these past 4 years. But that's the life of a Bills fan, right? I can lean on that while Chiefs fans constantly tell me, well, how many rings does he have?
And if I were a Chiefs fan, that's exactly what I would do.
Yes.
But also, screw off, whatever. Go celebrate with your rings and try keeping your players out of jail. So, Bruce, how are you doing on this Monday evening?
I'm doing okay. We have 2 small humans in the house that are not currently primarily residing with us. They're just temporarily residing with us. And my wife has gone on record as saying that seeing Bruce interact with 5 and 6-year-olds is like pay-per-view kind of stuff. You could charge money and people would pay it. Because, I never really thought that I would have to consider what my 5th favorite dinosaur was. But now all of a sudden, I got to do that. It kind of opens up your mind. It expands your mind talking to, small children. So it really is must-see TV.
Well, since you brought it up, top 5 dinosaurs. Let's go.
Okay, fine. So first off, the dinosaur who's at number 1 is fictional. Okay,
that's fine.
So let's start with that.
There's people who think actual dinosaurs are fictional, so
that's fair. So can I use fictional dinosaurs? I can use fictional dinosaurs.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Okay. So Spike from The Land Before Time is number 1 because, of course, he is. That makes complete sense.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Number 2 is the Tyrannosaurus Rex from Jurassic Park.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Number 3 is pterodactyl, but specifically the Pink Ranger's pterodactyl robot.
Ooh. Okay. All right.
Makes complete sense, right? Obviously, right? 4th is a Stegosaurus, but not Spike. Okay, it's the non-spiked Stegosauruses. Okay, so this is important. And the 5th one is Sarah, the 3-horn from Land Before Time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So those are my top 5 dinosaurs. And I had to think long and hard about it. But we were also watching Inside Out while this conversation was happening. So it was kind of like I think I was moved by all the talk about how important sadness is in your life. And that's why I gravitated toward Land Before Time, obviously, because
Yes.
that's an emotionally devastating movie.
Yes.
So
Oh yeah.
I think that's why I gravitated more toward cartoon dinosaurs during that conversation. I think if you asked me for my top 5 dinosaurs a month from now, where I'm not emotionally influenced, I think maybe I'd come up with something else.
Emotionally under the influence.
It's Inside Out, man. That movie will get you. Bing bong.
Oh,
man.
listen, I remember. It's okay. Very, very quickly. When my family and I, we all went to see Inside Out when it was in theaters, and the moment when, like, spoilers. I guess the movie's very old at this point. If you haven't seen it, sorry, but when she has to leave behind the old toy and the memories and whatnot, right? Like, me, my dad, my brother, we're all crying, and my mom is just like looking around, like she was apparently looking at someone else and wondering, and like, oh, they're crying at this, and then she looked at all of us crying. She's like, oh God, do I have no emotion?
If you didn't feel anything when Bing Bong said, "Take her to the moon for me," and then disappeared while waving, I don't know if I want to know you.
All right.
I need to watch Inside Out, apparently.
Like, I mean, there are sociopaths walk among us, right? Like, I mean, it's not crazy. I think it's an estimated, like, what was it, 2%, something like this? Like, of human Americans are, like, sociopaths or something? Hold on, I'm going to look that up real quick.
At least. Yeah, you do that. We're going to get to the other bit of business that we have to do, which is our ad reads. And that's going to start with our lovely friends Greg and Aaron over at the Cover One flagship shop.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Thank you to Greg and Aaron for always reading that with the utmost perfection every single week. The exact same read. Always appreciate it. We are also thankful to our wonderful friends over at, as soon as I can find the overlay, there it is, Underdog Fantasy. Folks, I don't know about you, but I'm in many leagues. But if that one league is not enough for you, go find a league in Underdog Fantasy, because it's all the fun of drafting your own players, but without the waivers and lineup decisions. You can go to Underdog Fantasy right now. You can use the promo code COVER1, that's the number 1, to sign up and make your first deposit, and Underdog will max that deposit up to $100. That is a free $100 in free play if you use the promo code COVER1. Even with inflation, that is one heck of a deal. Sign up today and start winning today. All right, so we are here to talk about the Bills' offense, and I guess sociopaths in America, which I guess the Bills' offense kind of include. I mean, you have Josh Allen, so I guess that kind of has to include him. Yeah. So I don't know. We'll start with Josh Allen. I don't want to spend a ton of time on Josh Allen because we already know he's amazing. And especially since you already spent most of the day defending Josh Allen on the Bird website. That is no longer the Bird website, but I'm still going to call it the Bird website. Uber, we'll start with you. Josh Allen, is he good?
Yeah. Yes. The answer is yes, obviously. I will say, like, one thing. I think we're going to learn a lot about Josh Allen this year. I still expect him to be an elite quarterback, still be QB2 throughout the NFL. However, I do want to see what he does without a true wide receiver one, or the belief of a wide receiver one. At the end of the season, we may be talking about Dalton Kincaid as a wide receiver one, which is probably where I'll end up leaning. But for Josh Allen right now, I want to see him take I don't know, even another step in his career. And if he takes another step, I don't even know what that means, but drop the turnovers a little bit and be even more an important part of this team's offense. He's going to be the engine that makes this car work. So it's all Allen this season, even though I think they're going to shift this offense a little bit towards the run. But yeah, Josh is going to be great. I'm really not super concerned about it.
Yeah, actually, Bruce, let's go to you first. You're the guest here. You talk.
I think that from a ranking standpoint, I don't think you need Josh Allen to be QB1 in the NFL to have a great year. I do think qualitatively wise, I think you cannot afford games like you saw week 1 against the New York Jets in 2023. I think what happens is when you have those elite level players, which we can agree that Stefon Diggs was that during his time in Buffalo overall. Now, obviously, there's a stat drop over the last couple of games here in 2023, but I think we can agree that he was an elite player during his time in Buffalo. And when you have those elite players, sometimes you can get away with things as a quarterback that you couldn't necessarily get away with. I mean, I can think of multiple catches that Stefon Diggs made against Miami where you go, you know what, maybe Josh shouldn't have thrown it, but Stefon Diggs is great, so you did it. Right. And so what happens is your room for error, your margin for error changes in an offense that's going to probably be less singularly focused. And so the margin for error means that you cannot have those games and get away with it. So you could have those games, but your ability to have them and say, oh, well, I'm not playing within the offense. That was the thing that we always talked about after the entire narrative. The week after the New York Jets game in 2023, the first week was he wasn't playing within the offense. You're going, what was this? Why were you trying to jump people 4 yards short of the first down? Like, what were you doing there? Right? Those games, you still almost won, right? Yeah. After all that, you lost in a punt return in overtime. Those types of games, you can't stay in anymore because you don't have elite level talent to bail you out. And so we like Dalton Kincaid. We think Dalton Kincaid can be a star in this league, but even elite level tight ends don't produce the same kind of numbers as elite level wide receiver ones, right? That's the reason why Travis Kelce is such an insane comp, is because you're talking this guy's, he's got multiple 12, 1,300 yard receivers seasons on his resume, and tight ends don't do that, like basically ever. So I think that the thing I want to see from Josh Allen isn't necessarily a movement forward in total production. In fact, if anything, it might be a slightly step back. If we do lean into the run game more, right? You might see less raw numbers from Josh Allen. But what I do want to see is I want to see it where you don't have that elite level talent at the receiving side, so you can't get away with what you used to get away with. So your necessity to play within the offense is actually higher now than it was before. You can't have those games. And I do think that not having Dorsey's offense is going to help that. Because I do think that Josh Allen was able to play within the offense a lot better as you start to lock down some of those routes, when you change the variance a little bit. So with Dorsey, one of the main changes from Dorsey to Joe Brady was you kind of cut back on the option routes. And you change the variance. And when you change the variance in the offense, you change that clock in Josh Allen's head that goes, I gotta go do something, right? I gotta make it happen, right? And then he does crazy stuff like try and jump over people 4 yards, shy of the first down, and you go, okay, what would you say you do here? You go straight office space on the guy at that point. And I want to eliminate the office space moments from Josh Allen. I think Joe Brady's a part of that, but being able to adapt to post Diggs life, I think, is also part of that. I think actually, this is going to sound strange, the fact that Stefon Diggs wasn't as significantly involved down the stretch actually gives me a little bit of optimism there.
Sure.
Because it wasn't like they were leaning on him down the stretch anyway.
Yep.
So for me, that's kind of what I want to see qualitatively, and that's how I think it gets done.
Yeah, since you bring up Diggs and the sort of lack of production he had down the stretch, it's when people were in the immediate aftermath of the Diggs trade to the Texans, and people were like, "Well, what's Josh Allen going to do without Stefon Diggs?" And it's like, I don't know. Did you watch the last half of the season? He didn't really do a ton for them. And, at least from a production standpoint, there's still certain things just by being Stefon Diggs, you draw attention to yourself, obviously. But yeah, I'm kind of with both of you in the sense that, like, yeah, there needs to be a different step in the evolution of Josh Allen, and progression is not linear, especially when it comes to NFL players. Like, the absolute raw production that Allen has gotten over the last 4 years is spectacular and really kind of unfounded in terms of who he was as a player versus just being any sort of player in the NFL. It's hard to be in a record like you brought up today, Uber, just being in a place where you can kind of count on him to get 40 plus touchdowns every single year. That's just a crazy thing to be able to do as a player. But if they do lean more into the run game and try to make him play a little bit more into the structure of the offense without restraining him necessarily, really doing more to just kind of help him, then I think you're going to see an actual progression in Josh Allen that I think Ken Dorsey was trying to get out of him, but Ken Dorsey's offense as a whole was a little too restrictive and not designed to... It was just a very simple offense, right? And it had issues with spacing. I mean, we've discussed this sort of stuff on this channel plenty when Ken Dorsey was here. But I think the Joe Brady offense has potential to really find that sweet spot of, we're going to do things to help you while also progressing you as a quarterback and just sort of move you along on a better path overall.
And I think I also throw out there, like, Bruce, his excitement that he mentioned in terms of Stefon Diggs at the end of the season not being as much a focal point of the offense, and that providing more excitement going into the season, or more optimism that the Bills can play well even without Diggs. The other thing that has me optimistic is Josh Allen actually speaking about his throwing motion, saying he had to revamp his throwing motion this offseason because he noticed he was lengthening it a little bit too much. He had to shorten up a little bit. And so it's exciting to know that Josh is even approaching this in a different way than he has maybe in the past.
Yeah, I'm with that as well. All right, where do we want to go? I'll give options: running back or tight end. I don't want to hit receiver just yet, but running back or tight end.
Running back.
Yeah. Running back. Okay, let's do running back. So running back. It is very cool to have a Pro Bowl running back on this roster right now. It's a very cool thing to be able to say that, even if you devalue the idea of the Pro Bowl, which you probably should. It's guys like Devin Singletary were, like, he was a good player. He was a good overall player, but he was just missing that sort of extra thing that made him different. Like, the thing with Singletary was that he was just good at everything, but not great at any particular thing. With James Cook, I mean, the progression from year 1 to year 2 is pretty impressive. I mean, and you could see it in the preseason where his decision making was better, his ability to see into the hole was better. Just everything that you expected to have happen from year 1 to year 2 in that regard happened, and that was exciting to see. You know, it was taking a bet on someone who, like, wasn't really all that refined as a runner in college and making him better, and that's what good coaches do. And I think with someone like Singletary, it was kind of always hard to see that because he was already just, like, baseline solid or good in so many areas, and his physical profile didn't leave a ton of room for growth in that regard. So it was hard to see progression so obviously with him. With James Cook, it's obvious, right? Like, going from year 1 to year 2 with him, it's very obvious. And some of that has to do with the offensive line as well, getting them revamped. But overall, just, like, having someone like him in that backfield and being able to lean on him is great. And I know people get upset about drops and stuff with him, and I get that, and the drop percentage is not great, but I think it gets a little overinflated how much we care about drops because they happen in really unfortunate circumstances where, you know, you're scoring a touchdown in Miami instead of getting strip sacked by Christian Wilkins on the very next play or whatever. And that's sort of tough to contextualize all the time, because sometimes all of our memories just sort of blend together as just like, he's got issues with drops and he should be better because he's a receiving back, blah, blah, blah. Yes, he should be a little bit better as a receiving back, but he's also good as a receiving back. Like, there are definitely good things that he brings in the receiving game, and that's obvious. He just has to clean up just that last little bit, and I think that we'll be looking at a genuinely special player that the Bills have not had in the backfield for a long, long time, I think.
Yeah, and I'll say, because I am one that brings up the drops a good amount. My main issue with the drops tends to be an issue I have with the entire Bills team minus Josh Allen, is that in high leverage situations, it seems like at times the only player I can trust is Josh. And then we see players like James Cook dropping passes that he should easily catch for a touchdown, or Tyler Bass missing field goals that he should be making. And it starts to kind of snowball into this ideal that maybe Josh is the only one that pressure doesn't get to. Like, he seems to always rise to the occasion, although he does have his goof ups here and there, not necessarily in the playoffs. But I think that's my biggest gripe with James Cook. I'll also throw out there, I don't think the plan with James Cook was to have him play the snap count he did last year, which I actually looked it up. It's lower than I expected, 55% of the snaps. I think they wanted more Damian Harris. They wanted more Latavius Murray, but Damian got hurt. Latavius Murray tailed off. And then they bring in Ty Johnson, who's a fine running back, but not anything necessarily special. He's a solid RB3, and they had to lean on James Cook a little bit more. I think that's why when they bring in someone like Ray Davis, I wonder if we're even going to see James Cook's snap count increase. Like, I don't think his production will significantly increase this year, because I think Ray Davis will be a big part of the offense, and I still think Ty Johnson's going to get some snaps. So if you're looking at it from a fantasy perspective, at least my perception of James Cook is I think he's going to be a really important part of the Bills' offense. I think he's going to be really good for the Bills. I don't see him matching his totals from last year. Like, he finished 6th overall in all-purpose yards. Like, that was phenomenal. He had a great year. I don't see him doing it this year, just because I think they have more consistent, better, younger talent in the backfield that they can lean on if James Cook needs a breather here and there.
Sure.
Well, there go my notes. I had my go-to line there was, I think that if Damian Harris would have stayed healthy, James Cook's snaps would not have been what they were going to be. And now I think you got a player that you wanted to. So to Uber's point about fantasy football, if you are in a PPR league, when it comes to running backs, the things you care about are the people who catch the passes and the people who score the touchdowns. Do we think James Cook is going to be markedly more of either of those things than Ray Davis? And I don't think the answer is yes. I think if you start to see some struggles with James Cook in passing, Ray Davis was like a really good pass catching back in college, guys. Like, he's not this bowling ball, strictly a bruiser, only downhill. Like, if you just think archetypes and you're trying to fit this square peg in a round hole and you desperately want to say thunder and lightning again, like, then you're missing who Ray Davis is.
Right.
But you just didn't actually watch him, which is fine if you didn't actually watch him. Maybe don't say that until you've actually watched him, because that's not who he is. And I actually think Damian Harris is a fair comp at prime Damian Harris, who I really liked, mind you, right? He's a compact back. He's good in the pass game. He has good inside vision, not necessarily massive long speed, but good enough, right? And I think we have a tendency to just kind of devalue the dynamism in players like Ray Davis, when in reality, James Cook may have gotten a lot of snaps last year because when he screwed something up like that, you really didn't have anybody else to go to. Latavius Murray was extremely effective in 2022, and the wall comes for everybody. It came for him in 2023. It just did. And bless him, it came for him way later in his career than it does for most running backs, because he's a superhuman freak. I mean, Latavius Murray is an absolute monster of a human being, but it comes for all of us eventually. And one of the big concerns about Derrick Henry going this year is, yes, hey, Ravens offense, awesome. You know, Gus Edwards scored a lot of touchdowns. Travis Etienne is in Jacksonville, and they're worried about his load.
Yeah.
Right? Derrick Henry's got like 4 billion carries on his body at that point, right? And so it comes for everybody eventually. And so this idea that you want to mix things up, I don't think it was part of the plan. To Uber's point, I don't think it was part of the plan. to have James Cook like that. We have a on-record statement from both the GM and the head coach of this team that it's just not good to have one guy carry the load. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't even necessarily take equal effectiveness for him to do that. Remember when Frank Gore was getting clearly outproduced by rookie Devin Singletary? And we just could not figure out why Sean McDermott would even give Frank Gore any carries. And what did he say? When he was asked, he flat out said, it's just not good for one guy to carry the load. And you go, even if one guy's a lot better than the other one? Like, apparently they just have to be within shouting distance of each other, and then you're going to see more of a timeshare. And I think that's what probably you're going to see. So I do think that James Cook's probably not going to get the same volume that he got last year, but that's a good thing.
Yeah.
More options is good. And I think Ray Davis is a good prospect. I really like Ray Davis. He's an older prospect, but quite frankly, when it comes to running backs, I don't really care.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I want to give him a second contract anyway.
Right. And you know, with I think you're totally on point about, like, if Damian Harris had stayed healthy, they would have definitely tried giving him more carries throughout the year and not given as much of the workload to James Cook. And honestly, like, you know, I think when most people think about Joe Brady, they tend to think of that 2019 LSU team, which obviously had Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Justin Jefferson and Brian Thomas, not Brian Thomas. Who's the guy who's on Carolina that it has a Terrace Marshall? There we go. Brain still works. And you know, Jamar Chase, and you know, just this super team that they had. But like, Joe Brady comes from that Sean Payton tree, and when you look at Sean Payton's time with the Saints, especially in those like late 2000s, early 2010s teams, like when they had Reggie Bush and they had Pierre Thomas and they had Mike Bell, like, he wants to give the workload to different guys and in different ways. And Sean McDermott definitely feels the same way, as Bruce brought up. And I'm okay with that too, right? Like giving James Cook as many carries as he did was fine for last year, given the circumstances they were in. And it's cool seeing him take on the workload in that way. However, I mean, I bring up this Dallas game a lot with James Cook, and more as a point about, like, comparing Joe Brady versus Ken Dorsey and how Ken Dorsey would have never done anything like that. But, like, James Cook was effective just because Dallas just could not figure out how to stop the run because they're just not built that way. If you had Ray Davis on that team in that game, James Cook doesn't get as many carries, but the rushing offense as a whole probably still dominates in that game pretty easily. And that's fine. That's how it should be. This is what, like, splitting carries at the end of the day should do for you. And I think that adding someone like Ray Davis, you know, if you're in we brought fantasy football as part of this. If you're in fantasy football and you lose some carries there, hey, go handcuff Ray Davis to your James Cook if that's what you need to do, like I did in my most recent dynasty draft. Underdog Fantasy, $100. Yeah, as part of your code with Cover One. Go sign up today. Anyway, so Ray Davis, James Cook, Ty Johnson as running back 3. I'm okay with that as well, because Ty Johnson has some good carries whenever he touches the ball. And I'm all right with that.
I will add just one last point too on James Cook. Like, it does seem like Sean McDermott has a uniquely short leash with James Cook when it comes to mental lapses. Like the fumble, I forgot I think he had his fumble his rookie year where they just sat him essentially the rest of the game. And he does seem to be a little bit more intense with that on James Cook. And I believe, for instance, that those drops are just mental lapses. It's not a lack of skill. He clearly has the soft hands to make those catches. It's just a mental lapse, which is a good thing in a sense because it's something you can resolve if you have him focus a little bit more on these things.
Sure.
But I do wonder if this season, if we see a mental lapse, see an early fumble, see a drop pass, if suddenly the Bills say, all right, Ray Davis, now's your chance. Go in, see how you perform as like a pseudo RB1 temporarily. So I do think now that Buffalo does have a little bit more depth there where if Cook does have some sort of issue at some point, they can put Ray Davis in, where last year it got to a point where it's Cook. Like James Cook was so clearly better than any other option. Yeah. It really didn't matter what he did, including and again, I don't even remember what game it was. Maybe it was Dallas where he fumbled it and the ball bounced right back to him and he kept running like that.
Denver.
That might have got him benched. It was Denver. It might have got him benched in previous games. But at that point, it was James Cook's show.
That Denver game was so freaking weird.
Yeah.
What a weird ass game that was. Ugh, I don't like thinking about that. All right, we're gonna move on to tight end because I really want to talk about these tight ends. Actually, before we do that, I've been ignoring comments because we have a lot to talk about. But I'm gonna hit some comments right now, and actually, we're gonna hit with this one because this is relevant for what we're about to talk about. Steve Noble, how long will it take Josh to gain trust in his new receivers? It took Kincaid 5 to 6 weeks last year to get in good graces. The beginning part of this year is terrifying to me. So, first of all, beginning part of the year, just very quickly, we'll go through like the first 6 weeks or so. Cardinals in week 1, Dolphins, Jags, Ravens, Texans, Jets. I don't love that schedule. I'm okay starting against the Cardinals, even though I think they'll be kind of spicy this year. But I do like kind of hitting the Dolphins early in week 2 and Thursday, regardless of all that, though. With Kincaid, I'll leave the comment up there, I guess. With Kincaid, I don't know if it was necessarily... I guess it's probably multifold, like many other things in life. But maybe part of it was Josh gaining trust in Kincaid, but also part of it was Ken Dorsey and how he decided to deploy Kincaid as well. Not to say that he just completely only used him as like this sort of underneath check down safety blanket option, because there were definitely times where he got schemed up and Josh didn't necessarily look for him. He was looking for Diggs. But down the stretch, you also saw that connection begin to unfold. And what's interesting is you take the games from when Ken Dorsey was the offensive coordinator and compare them to from when Joe Brady took over. It's not quite so drastic. He has more yards under Joe Brady. But the interesting part, or at least the part that I find interesting, is he had one drop, this is according to SIS, one drop in the weeks when Ken Dorsey was the offensive coordinator. He had 5 drops when Joe Brady was the offensive coordinator, which makes me feel better in a way because he had good production in that time period with Joe Brady, and knowing that the majority of his drops came during that time kind of makes me feel like there was a lot of meat left on the bone that like just wasn't taken advantage of. And if you take advantage of that this year, you're looking at like a really great player potentially. So yeah, we'll go with Bruce to start this conversation. Bruce.
So for me, the second you started talking about Ken Dorsey's deployment of Dalton Kincaid early in 2023, I had like a visceral physiological reaction to that. Because if I saw one more like chip and leak from Dalton Kincaid, I was gonna scream at that point. And I was like, I just don't. You ever seen that meme with the Ferrari in the next to the manufactured home with the awning over it?
Yes.
Right?
With the tall unmowed grass. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It was. That's the way I felt early in the season. I said, okay, you know what? We're just gonna get time to just learn the offense. We're gonna. It's fine. Everything's gonna be fine. And then all of a sudden, the Patriots game happens later in the year, and I went, "Thank you!" Like from The Office. I'm like Michael Scott hitting the table and just pointing with his hands and going, "Thank you!" And you drafted a guy in Dalton Kincaid who, it's hilarious. The narrative on Dalton Kincaid from Buffalo Bills fans over the last year has shifted so meaningfully, because when you first drafted him, it was, well, this team doesn't run 12 basically ever, right?
Right.
And all of a sudden, we're expected to have a secondary tight end who comes in and makes himself worth a first-round pick. Like, you're going to get that level of utilization. And then all of a sudden, a year later, I posed the question on social media, and I went, so would you trade the 25th pick in the draft, if the Green Bay Packers asked you, for Dalton Kincaid? And of course, everyone completely missing the point. We're all like, well, why would the Packers do that? They have 2 tight ends. I said, no. Just follow me here, okay? Just operate in the hypothetical. Okay, don't worry about the Packers right now. Don't worry about it. Eyes on the prize, baby. Eyes on the prize. Would you trade pick 25? And everybody was like, no, you need a top 10 pick. You went from how are you going to make this guy worth a first-round pick to we would never give up the pick that we literally just used on him last year. And that's not because of Ken Dorsey. That's because of what you saw from Dalton Kincaid down the stretch. Yeah. When the ADOT started to jump up. And the original question was, how do we feel about Josh Allen in regards to adjusting to new pieces? Sure. I don't think it was Josh Allen adjusting to new pieces. I think it was Ken Dorsey not using him.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that, yeah.
Look, John Brown, Cole Beasley, Stefon Diggs, these guys were all at one point new pieces. They were just veteran new pieces. So I think if you want to try and translate the Dalton Kincaid thing, you think, okay, that's going to be more of a Keon Coleman question than a Curtis Samuel question. You know what I mean? So for me, I think we just need to make sure we're assigning the right diagnosis to what it was that caused Dalton Kincaid to have kind of a slow start. And I think that was kind of juxtapositioned with what we saw in Detroit. And so that made us feel some sort of way about the way Dalton Kincaid was being utilized, because we were watching Ben Johnson scheme up all sort of nonsense for his tight end, and you just went, can I get leak? It's undefeated. Can I get leak one time across the formation? Just have him pretend, run in 12, have Dalton Kincaid pretend like he fell down 2 steps off there, and then just leak out the backside, and you get 30-yard chunk gains. Can you please just do that one thing? And we saw it from Ben Johnson in Detroit. And, Laporta had us feeling some sort of way. I don't think it was Josh Allen acclimating to Dalton Kincaid. I think it was Ken Dorsey acclimating to Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think this season, now with Joe Brady and now with the trust that Josh has built with Dalton Kincaid, you combine those 2 things, and I'm expecting a monster year from Kincaid. Like I think I've tweeted out, I think there's been 9 tight ends that have caught 1,000 or caught 100 balls in a single season. I expect Dalton Kincaid to push that number. And I know that's a very lofty expectation to pick him as the 10th tight end ever to have 100 catches in a season. But I think he's going to be the focal point of the receiving offense. And to that end, I think the tight ends as a whole could be the focal point of this offense. That's why I think it's wild that Dawson Knox is just being written off as a nothing piece of this team. I do not see a world where Dawson Knox is at like a 25% snap share. Like I expect him on the field 50% of the time or close to that. And the Bills in 12 personnel, moving Dalton Kincaid out wide in the slot, in line, and doing the same with Dawson Knox, to be honest. And Knox has his own kind of unique skill set to Dalton Kincaid, and you can create unique mismatches with these two. I'm really excited for that on top of the outside, which we'll get a little bit to later with the wide receivers. I think this tight end room is great, and I think you could argue that 1 and 2, they're probably a top 5-7 tight end room in the NFL. I think we went through this on a different show, and we were like, oh, Baltimore's got a really good one, and a couple other teams. But no, I'm excited for this room, and I don't think it's just Dalton Kincaid. I think Dawson Knox is going to be an important part of this team.
I want to jump in there real fast about Dawson Knox. And I think you brought up a really good point, and I want to highlight it. And it's this idea that Dawson Knox is somehow going to be a 20 or 25% snap guy, and I don't think that's true. I agree with Uber. I want to point this out. Who are your 4 best receivers on the team right now? I didn't say wide receivers, right? Receivers, right? Okay, so Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, and then who? Who is that 4th guy? Now, this is important. The assumption that it's Keon Coleman right now, is the thing that we're missing with Dawson Knox. I think those two things are at odds right now. The reason why people were going to think that that Dawson Knox is going to get no snaps is because they think Keon Coleman is going to walk in the door and be, a 50, 60, 70% snap player. And I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
So right now, it's a little bit like that decision you have to make on defense. When you have an offense and they go 11, you have to make a decision between your nickel defender or your 3rd linebacker against their slot receiver, right? It's the same thing, but inverted. So now you have to make a decision on offense. Okay, who's my 4th guy? Is it Dawson Knox or is it Keon Coleman? Assuming it's Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir. And I that's the decision point. I think we kind of forgot that Dawson Knox had a pretty good year 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then he had broken wrist last year. And so Dalton Kincaid come in, kind of steal all his thunder. And like the Bills didn't think they were going to draft Dalton Kincaid when they gave Dawson Knox that deal. They didn't. Yeah. And so I think I'm not here standing for Dawson Knox. I'm just saying that that's the decision point that I just don't think we're thinking about. I think we're assuming that Keon Coleman is going to walk in the door and be like a 60-70% snap guy. I don't think that's true, and that's the reason why I think that Uber's right. That's why Dawson Knox is probably going to get a bigger snap share than you think.
Yeah, and it wouldn't stun me either. Like if you compare Dalton Kincaid's rookie totals, like his 600 and like I think 67 receiving yards or something like that, to whatever Keon Coleman's going to produce this year, I expect Keon's numbers to be lower than Dalton's were. Actually, fairly marketably, especially in the reception total. So with that in mind, like those stats have to go somewhere else. I think they're going to go to Dawson Knox unless Keon Coleman steals the show this offseason, and suddenly the Bills are like, we found this dude that can be a true wide receiver one. Let's roll him out there week one, and he puts up 100 yards. I still think Dawson Knox has to be an integral part of this offense. I just can't fathom a world where the Bills he's just a backup to Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah, 100%. As Sweet Spike here says, big up to UberHansen repping Glenn Goodberry. He's always got. I feel like you always have the Glenn Goodberry hats on.
I love this hat, yeah.
Always good hats. Always good choices. Also said Ray Davis looks smooth in his highlights, has vision enhanced. Totally agree with that. I mean, just looking at him briefly after the Bills drafted him, I was like, yeah, I'm really into this particular pick. BK, catches don't win games, touchdowns do. 2 touchdowns, 1 cut from Kincaid this year. Yes. I also sincerely doubt he'll be anywhere close to 2 touchdowns for the entirety of 2024. I expect a lot more touchdowns from Dalton Kincaid this year. Any other?
Touchdowns are also really variable.
They are.
We can probably talk about this. Aside from quarterbacks, touchdowns are super duper inconsistent year over year. Like it's one of the main reasons why. Okay, let's circle back to the fantasy conversation.
Sure.
There are people who are meaningfully concerned about Sam Laporta this year.
Yeah.
Because he had 10 touchdowns last year.
Yeah.
And they're all like, does he 10 touchdowns? You're probably not going to get 10 touchdowns again from Sam Laporta. So you think, okay, well, what does his fantasy look like if he had league average, which is like 5 touchdowns, right? For an upper tier tight end, right? That touchdowns are weird. I know that they win games, but they win games at a team level.
Right.
I don't really care who gets them, right? And so this idea, I just score the touchdowns, right? I don't care how I score the touchdowns, score the touchdowns, right? Buddy Nix. Don't tell me about the labor pains. Show me the baby, right? I'm going to go full Buddy Nix. And so for me, when I think about touchdowns on an individual level, I go, yeah, I want more touchdowns from Dalton Kincaid. But I don't really care as long as they get scored by somebody. Now, I mean, I do care. I have Dalton Kincaid in Dynasty. But
that's fair.
Aside from that, putting aside that, I just touchdowns vary pretty significantly year over year by player.
Man, was not expecting a Buddy Nix reference here on this show. I'm not gonna lie. Never 5 get.
Office Space, sociopaths, Buddy Nix. This is what you get. Yeah. You had Bruce on. You knew what you were getting.
That's fair. There's nothing else I can say about that. So, gonna move on to offensive line or wide receivers.
Wide receivers.
Wide receivers. Okay, let's do this. So, the Bills are perfectly fine at wide receiver, and we don't need to worry about a single thing, right? Right? No, of course not.
Right.
So, the Bills. I don't want to start with Keon Coleman. I want to start with Curtis Samuel first, because this could potentially be one of those signings in the offseason that people look back on, both fans of this team and people outside of Buffalo look back at and are like, wow, this really was a good signing, wasn't it? We've brought up the fact that Curtis Samuel had the best season of his career with Joe Brady when they were in Carolina, and that was when, someone not named Josh Allen was his quarterback. Was it Teddy Bridgewater that
Teddy
year?
Bridgewater, 2020.
Yeah. Listen, I love Teddy Bridgewater. I really do. Great person. Coaching his high school alma mater now. Great guy. But Teddy Bridgewater giving you your best season in the year of our Lord 2020. Now you get to work with Josh Allen. So there's that. So I think that there's so much potential with Curtis Samuel. And I think that, this was something that Anthony brought up when he had Mina Kimes on, which was that he's still only 27 years old. And it feels like he's been in the league for a lot longer. And I think that's partially because he's on his third contract. And you just sort of assume that people who are on their third contract are like pushing 30, if not already 30. So for him to still be in prime years in an offense that he's familiar with a quarterback that like the best quarterback he's ever played with before Josh Allen was probably Cam Newton. And Josh Allen's better than Cam Newton. There's just no doubt in my mind about that. I think combining all of these things together with the fact that there's no clear wide receiver one at the moment, and the Bills are hoping that Keon Coleman turns into a wide receiver one eventually, but it's not going to be this year. I think the amount of targets that Curtis Samuel is going to get and the amount of touches, including rushings, that he's going to get this year is going to be pretty high, and I would be very surprised if it wasn't. Coin flip. I don't know who wants to go.
I feel like I dominated a lot of time in the tight end thing, so I feel like I'm going to go defer to Uber.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I'm gonna go with this. So from a national perspective, right, the Curtis Samuel thing is almost getting written off as like a nothing signing by the Bills.
Right.
And the thing that bothers me most about that, and this is what 3 rings buys you, this is what 3 Super Bowl championships buys you, is that Marquise Brown is being billed as this phenomenal, incredible signing by the Chiefs. Oh my gosh, how could the NFL let Marquise Brown go to the Chiefs? Not to mention Xavier Worthy, but we don't have to get into that discussion. Marquise Brown and Curtis Samuel, statistically, Samuel's been slightly better the past few years, and arguably with worse quarterbacks throwing him the football. So I look at it and I say, if we just say those two are equivalent, like I'm perfectly fine with Curtis Samuel coming to the Bills, and I think he could have the best season of his career because he does have the best quarterback throwing to him. And you also brought up the rushing aspect of him. Like we've seen in the training camp videos, him lined up right next to Josh Allen in the backfield. That's super exciting to me because now you have that speed threat out of the backfield. You can play with the defense a little bit with that in mind. Curtis Samuel is going to be a really fun receiver this year. I don't need him to go for 1,000 yards. If he goes for 800 yards, that's a great season by Curtis Samuel. And you add that up to whatever Khalil Shakir is going to do, and Keon Coleman and Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid and James Cook. And I love that the Bills have a lot of weapons this season that I'm excited about. It's not as top heavy, let's say. It's not, okay, they have Stefon Diggs and Gabe Davis. Like those are the 2 I'm excited about and nothing really else behind them. No, now I'm excited about all these guys, and Curtis Samuel very well could end this season as the Bills' true wide receiver one. And that's exciting for a Bills fan.
Yeah.
Curtis Samuel's a better player than John Brown was when he signed with the Bills.
Yes.
And John Brown walked in the door and got a 1,000-yard season.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's crazy. I say that, and then you sit around, you digest it, and you go, "Oh, I think that's right." Like, that's not a hot take. You say it, and your immediate knee-jerk response is, "That's a stupid take." And then all of a sudden, you start thinking about it, and about 8 seconds in, you go, it's obvious. That's like the coldest take in the history of mankind. When it first popped into my brain, I went, "No." And then a few seconds later, I went, "Well, obviously." And I think this is one of those scenarios where, familiarity with the offensive coordinator, dynamism, versatility means you're just going to get touches, right? You're just going to get touches. If Curtis Samuel ended the year with 72 catches and 40 carries, would anybody be shocked by this? No. I wouldn't. I would not be shocked at all if Curtis Samuel ended up with 110 touches this year, at all. And so for me, you don't do that as if you're building it up. He's replacing Stefon Diggs. Mm-hmm. This is you're replacing Stefon Diggs in the aggregate. conversation, right?
Yes.
This is a Moneyball conversation. I know everybody's seen the GIFs, and I'm not the first person to make that thing. Funny story, I've never seen Moneyball.
It's
Really?
very, very good.
I
It
know,
is very
I
good.
know, I know.
It also
haven't seen
gets like put in the category of like dad movies, and like it definitely is, but it's also like good too. So
The reason I never gravitate toward it is I'm not a baseball guy.
That
at
does
all.
take away from a little bit.
Like,
a little bit.
I was out with an acquaintance of mine. We were watching a fight, gosh, a year ago, and I said I'm not a baseball guy. He goes, well, everyone says that, but you're a baseball guy. I said I can't name you 5 baseball players. And he's like, no, you can name me 5 baseball players. And so, all right, here we go. Shohei Ohtani. He goes, yeah. I go, there's a guy in Philadelphia who used to play for the Angels, and I don't remember his name. And he goes, really? And I'm like, there's a guy in Cleveland who's Jose Ramirez, I think. And he goes, yes, that's it. And I go, there's a guy who used to be in Cleveland who's now a Met, and I don't remember. Chocolate Man, like friends, Lindor, that was what it is, Lindor. And I was like, I remembered I named his name because of the, Lindor the chocolate, right? And I was like,
oh god,
I couldn't get to 5. I couldn't do it.
I thought you were going to say Cocoa Crisp.
Yeah.
So to help you out, Bruce, not that you asked for it or even care, but there's always the Matt Stafford Clayton Kershaw connection.
Oh right, Clayton Kershaw. He's a pitcher, right?
Yes, he
The
is.
Dodgers.
See, you're practically a baseball fan, Bruce. Come on, what are you talking about?
I still don't know what constitutes a win. Still to this day, I don't know what
They're
constitutes
just
a win.
as important as QB wins, just so you know.
There you go. I'm taking all that. Somebody asked me every time I go, they try and counter with like, well, do you think wins are a pitcher stack? I'm like, dude, you're barking at the wrong tree. I have no idea. Wins are a pitcher stack. Like I know this is intended to like back me in a corner intellectually, but joke's on you. I'm standing in a round room because I don't know anything. Right? It's as smooth as my brain around here. So that's just anyway.
So
It's Curtis Samuel as a touch guy, even if he's not a wide receiver 1 in the traditional sense, he's still a touch guy. And so if you don't think he'd be the same level of touches with a greater level of efficiency than we saw in 2020 with the Carolina Panthers, then, I mean, the wide receiver nerd community, there's like a sub-community of people who like love wide receivers. These people have been begging for Curtis Samuel to get good quarterback play for like 5 years. Because he's actually really good. And people still believe that he is what he was when he came out, which was, where are you going to play him at? Is he a running back? Is he a wide receiver? Like, they think that he's still that player that he was in 2018, and that's not the case.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I really loved Curtis Samuel when he came out of college. He's always had like solid, good seasons in the NFL. I think we're much like when John Brown came here and had his best season in his only like full season with the Bills in 2019. I think you're gonna see something pretty similar to that with Curtis Samuel as well. In addition to potential career type seasons, Khalil Shakir.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend a ton of time on him because I think all 3 of us probably agree Khalil Shakir is good. Yes, cool.
Good at the footballs.
Good at the footballs. Mm-hmm. And the question is, we all knew this coming out of college, but he still fell in the 5th round to the Bills anyway, which always felt weird. And then, like, in his rookie year, he wasn't used a ton. And so it was kind of like, well, maybe there's just something that we don't know about. Maybe he's just one of these guys that doesn't, like, practice well, and so it's hard to, like, justify putting him on the field or something like that. And then you get into year 2, and it's like, no, he's just good. And we can't possibly figure out why he fell to the 5th round of a draft where he clearly shouldn't have, when a lot of people thought he was like a day 2 pick. And we're going into year 3. I feel so comfortable calling him wide receiver 3, and him producing the way they did last year, especially down the stretch, was not only just good to see, it was necessary for this team to win the games that they did. Bruce, who wants to go? Pitcher's choice. Okay, so Bruce, got it.
Khalil Shakir is, as we mentioned, good at the footballs.
Yes.
And I think that his archetype just has a tendency to fall. I am not saying he's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I am saying that there's a similar archetype of player there. They're maybe shorter of stature, right? The catch radius is usually really small, right? You have shorter arms, which matters to NFL general managers because the catch radius is small. You think, okay, this is a player who you can manufacture touches for. You can play him in the slot. You can, like, those players just get pushed down because they're perceived to be high floor players. And with the perception of higher floor comes the perception of lower ceiling. But that's not necessarily true. Those two things function independently of each other. So we have a tendency to believe that high floor players are, by definition, lower ceiling players, right? And that's not true. Like, I don't know why we do that, but we do it all the time in the NFL draft. We go, oh, well, this guy's the boom or bust, but this guy, he's the safe pick, right? The same thing you've said about every offensive lineman drafted in the first round. He's the safe pick, right? As if somehow offensive linemen don't bust at a rate that is even reasonable, which is not true at all. But we just view it as busty. And I think the reason that is because you can't statistically measure an offensive lineman as well as you can statistically measure a skill position player. So that's the reason why we view them as safe, because it's out of sight, out of mind. Like, even if they suck, we don't really notice. And so that to me is why I think that happens. But this archetype of player, it almost takes multiple years of really good production before you're going to believe. Like, people were totally ready to sell out Amon-Ra St. Brown after his, everyone else on his team was hurt. So he's probably, he only looked good because of that, right? Puka Nacua, how much did you listen to people 3-4 games into 2023 going, when Cooper Kupp comes back, it's not going to be the same, right? It's this idea that a day 3 wide receiver almost has to earn themselves multiple times over before they get the same level of he has arrived or, we've established he's good at the footballs that a first-round receiver would have. I think the same thing's happening on the defensive side of the ball with Christian Benford. But to me, that's what it is with Khalil Shakir. What it is you're going to need to see it from a lot of people. A lot of people are going to say you're going to need to see it from multiple seasons from Khalil Shakir at that level of efficiency or close to that level of efficiency before they'll say, okay, he's just a highly efficient player. Like, I don't think you're going to run 130 targets through the guy, but he's a highly efficient wide receiver 2/3 on your team as far as target share goes, and you're going to be very happy with him in that role. And so that's why I think people get disrespected. I think it's an archetype thing, and I think it comes along with a lot of day 3 wide receivers who don't have massive athletic traits.
I absolutely love that Christian Benford comp right there for the disrespect Christian Benford gets. Like, if Benford was drafted where Elam was drafted, I think the national perception of Christian Benford would be significantly different, and he'd be a name you hear a lot more. But that's a different conversation. As for Khalil Shakir, when the Bills drafted him, I was excited. I was like, this guy seems fun. He seems interesting. I saw some highlights out of Boise State, and I was like, all right, this guy could be good in this offense. And then his rookie season came and went, and I was like, you know what? He's good. He's got the versatility, can play inside, can play outside. That's wonderful. I like him as a good reserve piece on this team. That's great. That's his role. He'll be a nice reserve player. And for the most part, that's what he was through the early part of 2020. What year is it? 2023. And then he blossomed at the end of the season, like absolutely blossomed. And that catch against the Steelers for that touchdown, that was the really the true moment for me where I was like, whoa, wait, this guy could be a legitimate weapon for this team. He had played well prior to that, but that was the really flashy play to see from him. I'm really excited for Khalil Shakir in his 3rd season in the NFL. I don't think that he's going to be a 1,000-yard receiver. I think some Bills fans' expectations of him are reaching a level that's a little bit absurd. I would love him to have 1,000 yards. But again, if he has 600, 700, 800, like if he's in that range, even if he has 500, as long as the totality of Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, and Khalil Shakir reach a level that's acceptable, like he's going to be a part of this receiving core and a part that I trust heading into 2024.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about Keon Coleman, because the expectations for Keon Coleman are what's going to color the perception of Keon Coleman as a rookie. I think some people are probably going to fall into their own trap, kind of expecting that Keon Coleman's going to be somebody that can get, 800 yards at least and score a bunch of touchdowns and stuff. It'd be cool if that happens. It'd be great. I really doubt that that's the case, though. So then, what should the expectation be? For me, I think if you're looking somewhere between like 400 and 600 yards, and even taking into account that touchdowns are variable, obviously, I think there's a good chance for a lot of touchdowns for Keon Coleman in year one. And I would call that a successful rookie season for someone like Keon Coleman, who is certainly a bit raw, who does have room to grow. But I think this is somebody who can still contribute in year one, but also doesn't have to have the workload put on him as the 33rd overall pick for this team. We'll start with Uber. Let's start with Uber. Yeah,
I'll take it. So, not comp, but production comp as a rookie. So, not that these players are similar in the way they approach playing football, but just from a production standpoint because of their surroundings, fits that production comp would be Jackson Smith and Jigba. He was the third part of that Seattle Seahawks offense behind Tyler Lockett, behind DK Metcalf. He did not need to put up massive stats, and he didn't. He had a solid year, 63 catches, 628 yards. I don't think I expect Keon Coleman to hit 63 catches. I think that would be pretty significant for him. But 628 yards, I'd say, yeah, that's a great season for he's not going to be the focal point of the offense. And I think a lot of perceptions of rookie wide receivers are shaped by the Justin Jeffersons of the world and the Jamar Chases of the world who go out and have massive rookie seasons. The Bills don't need that from him because he's not that guy in this offense. If he ends up being that guy in this offense, it's going to be a massive, but I just don't see it as a necessity heading into.
Yeah. Bruce, what do you got?
Keon Coleman is 20 years old. I think
Accurate.
When you draft a player who's 20 years old, you need to understand that trajectory that you love so much, the reason why you drafted him at 20 and you got excited about the curve, that also means that he's closer to he's not as close to being a finished product. But we view it as a positive from a developmental curve standpoint. Oh man, look at all the room to grow, right? And then we don't give him any time to grow, which is just an oddly hypocritical way of us looking at rookies. On one hand, you draft him, he's 24, he's played 1 billion years of college football. You're like, okay, well, his upside might be limited, right? And then you say, okay, his upside's limited, but he should be closer to his ceiling now. That's the reason why you thought his upside was limited. But then we don't do the thing on the inverse. We treat 20-year-old rookies like they're 24-year-old rookies when we just said that the reason why we like the fact that they were 20-year-old rookies is because they had room to grow, but then we don't give them any time to room to grow,
Right.
Which is weird. So for me, if Keon Coleman has 500 yards receiving this year, I'm fine with that. Yeah. I don't think Keon Coleman's a top 4 target. He might not be a top 5 target for this team right away because we already talked about this is a James Cook is going to catch some passes. Ray Davis is going to catch some passes. We talked about that in the running back section. Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Dalton Kincaid. We had the Dawson Knox and Keon Coleman conversation earlier.
Yep.
And then you have a running back or two who's going to catch some passes. So I'm fine with that. If Keon Coleman comes in and catches 45 passes for 500 yards, I don't think the world's ending. I think you drafted him as 20-year-old and you said, well, he's got a lot to work on because you want him to develop into a guy who can be a meaningful part of this offense. But I don't even think you necessarily drafted him thinking to himself, well, this is a guy who's going to dominate targets. Like, he didn't have 1,000-yard receiving in college.
Right.
Like, he wasn't a massive target getter in college. I don't think he profiles as that guy in the NFL either. He profiles as a guy who can come in and be a player who gives you something you don't have and gave you something you didn't have last year either.
Right. And you don't necessarily need him to be a high target guy because you already kind of have that guy in Kincaid.
Right.
So you don't need to like funnel a bunch of targets to a rookie wide receiver who is just, gonna be struggling. I mean, I think we all expect him to struggle to some degree or another. You don't need to force the ball to him if he's not there. Like, that's why you have Curtis Samuel. That's why you have Khalil Shakir. That's why you have Dalton Kincaid and Dustin. You have options. You have options here. It's not all reliant on him. And that's what makes me feel okay about drafting somebody who is as raw as he is, because he will have time and room to grow. And hopefully people will understand that and give him the space that he needs in order to go through the growing pains that he is inevitably going to have. So I still like the Keon Coleman pick. I never really wavered from Keon Coleman from what I saw of him in college. There was all this stuff, his profile doesn't really look great compared to others, combine, et cetera, whatever. This is a unique player, a talented player. You gotta just take chances on those types of guys when you get them. So we're going to move on unless there are other takes about other wide receivers that are on this roster.
I got none.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Unless Bruce has like Chase Claypool tirades and takes it. No? Okay. Just
No, I do not.
I even if you did, I was going to cut you off. So we're going to move on to our last portion, and that is the offensive line. We're going to just jump quickly through this. I don't think we really need to talk about Deion Dawkins, and I don't think we really need to talk about Osiris Torrance, other than he had a really good rookie season, and I'm looking forward to year 2 with him. Very quickly, let's talk about Spencer Brown and just the fact that he's in a contract year. Do you feel good enough about Spencer Brown to pay him a contract for him to stay on this team moving forward? Bruce.
If
first.
Spencer Brown's agent is going to take the Austin Jackson contract, I'd think about it. But
Sure.
I suspect, based on the time of year and based on the trajectory of the player, specifically based on the situation where Spencer Brown coming in was one of those players. Spencer Brown was, in a lot of ways, the Keon Coleman of offensive line, right? He came in very young, had a lot of development to do, and you're like, okay, he was 7-on-7 guy. I mean, this guy was he was just a really athletic dude. That's what you got. You got a really athletic dude who was very new to the position. Thankfully, you ended up bringing in one of the best offensive line coaches in football, in Aaron Cromer, to be able to work with him. And after a struggle of a second year, and then not really having the offseason because of the injuries he was dealing with, all of a sudden he comes out and has a much, much, much better year. If I'm his agent, I'm going, you know what? I'll take the chance. I'll roll the dice. I'm going to hold out for a markedly better deal than Austin Jackson got. And, he could be one of those players that you get there and you just have to make a call. Like, not because you don't like him, but because the market might not be $16 million a year. It might be $19 million a year or $20 million a year. And then you go, okay, how many of those types of tackles can one team have, right? The Texans have 2. Obviously you think about the Texans, you go, okay, they have 2 extremely highly paid offensive linemen on either side with Titus Howard and Laramie Tunsil. But, okay, do the Bills want to do that? Are you going to go out and make a splash? A lot of discussion, this is tied in with our wide receiver discussion. What if the wide receivers do let the team down? What if you look at Brandon Ayuk next year and you go, okay, I want to go grab Brandon Ayuk. You're probably not going to grab Spencer Brown at that point. You have to make a call. But if your wide receivers come in and they go, you know what? That didn't stop us from being able to have a good offense. We went through 2024, had a good offense. We were fine. Then all of a sudden, maybe you do want to sign Spencer Brown, even if the price tag does go up to $17, $18 million a year. So I think that those two things could be viewed as inverted. I think the wide receiver play and the offensive line play could be viewed as two sides of the same coin. And based on the way that either one of them performs could impact the other one when it comes to Spencer Brown.
Yeah, and I'll agree with Bruce on basically everything you said. And Austin Jackson, that's my contract comp. Like if the Bills offered that right now and Brown accepted, which to your point, I don't think he would, I would be ecstatic as a Bills fan. So yeah, basically everything you said, Bruce, I'm with you.
I'd be willing to pay him a little bit more than Austin Jackson. Not like significantly more necessarily, but I think that there is a strong upward trajectory with Spencer Brown, and I think that this fourth year with him is going to be a really good season with him. The only other thing I want to talk about is obviously the switch that's being made on the offensive line with Connor McGovern being put at center, and oh my God, somebody remind me who's at left guard now.
David Edwards.
David Edwards, my own name. That's great. I know that there's probably some concern. I know Uber has you've expressed some concern potentially about what this might look like. Personally, I'm fine with it because it's not like Connor McGovern has never played center. He played center all throughout college. It was only in the NFL when he got pushed into guard because he got drafted by Dallas and they already had Travis Frederick. But and I like David Edwards. I was surprised that he was available when the Bills signed him last year. And I'm a little surprised he didn't get more money to leave the Bills this year. I think that this offensive line with this little shuffle that they're making is probably going to end up being fine. It may not be the same level of excellence that you had with Mitch Morse, because I think he's a great center and he's hard to replace. But I do think that they'll be fine. I think on the whole, an offensive line needs to function as a unit. I think Aaron Kromer, with this particular group of guys, is going to get them to function really well as a unit.
I'll let Bruce Elusive here close us out with it because I think people have heard my qualms about the center position enough on the show. So Bruce, you have the floor to kind of close out the talk of the offensive line. As he's on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute, Bruce.
So there are two competing Bruce theories when it comes to the offensive line. And the first one is you'd rather get off the player a year too early than a year too late. And don't ever trade away offensive line depth ever if it's solid because you can't get it. Reasonable offensive linemen are basically impossible to find in this league. There's a meaningful offensive line problem in this league. I will say that the number one reason why spring football has historically not succeeded is offensive line play. Offensive line play has been so bad in spring football that you basically just can't even run an offense.
Right.
Like you just can't run a meaningful offense, and it's just a disaster, and it's not watchable. It's not watchable football. Now, all of a sudden, you consolidate the USFL and the XFL, and all of a sudden you get better offensive line play, and shockingly enough, look at that. It ended up being the most successful spring league we've ever had. So the NFL has an offensive line problem. So when the Buffalo Bills let go of Mitch Morse and traded away Ryan Bates, I went, no, I don't like this. And everyone got super mad because it's the offseason. We're supposed to like everything that the team does. Like, that's just the way it works. Like, literally anything the team does, we're like, yeah, that's the best thing I've ever seen. Yeah, I don't know who that player is, but he's the best, right? And it's like Jeremy White has that flow chart where anybody signs in the offseason, they sign with your team, it's a great deal. They sign with another team, it's like, well, not for that money. Like, that's just the way it works, right?
Right.
And so I didn't want to trade away Ryan Bates. I don't want to trade away reasonable depth. Yes, was he too expensive? Yes, absolutely. Did he want out? I don't know, maybe. I don't care. Just don't get rid of good players, right? Just don't do it, ever. And then when Morse gets cut, I go, okay, Morse was a meaningful piece of the run game in a significant way, and I don't think we pay attention. I think the NFL is moving a lot more toward man. For a long time in the NFL, it was primarily a zone rushing system. We have seen teams start to kind of trickle that way another direction, and all of a sudden you see these man power concepts start to come in. One of those man concepts is pin and pull. And to do that, you need to have a center who can get on the edge and make contact with a moving target that's a lot smaller than him. And that sounds easy. And I need you to understand that Mitch Morse made it look easy. If you've ever actually played offensive line, it is not easy. It's not at all. Yeah. It's like watching those superhero movies where inevitably there's that one gigantic bad guy and then Ant-Man's like flying around him and you're trying to make contact and he's like swatting like a fly. That's how it feels like when you're a 6'6" offensive lineman trying to turn the corner. All of a sudden there's a 5'9", 180-pound nickel defender trying to knife in behind you and blow up a play on the backfield. It's really hard to make contact with a moving target. That is a skill that it's difficult, and not being able to have it hurts your ability to do a lot of things in the man run game that you want to do outside, which of course is what you want with James Cook. So I'm glad that the Buffalo Bills have an archetype behind Mitch Morse that profiles as that type of player. And I'm glad they drafted a player who profiles as that type of player. So the Bills have had kind of like an embarrassment of riches with that archetype, but I'm not willing to chance it. Yes, I understand that Connor McGovern profiles as being a very Mitch Morsean type of player. That's 100% true. And I understand that VPG profiles as being a, by the way, that's just going to catch on. I just want you to know that. Cedric Van Pan Grazer, we're going with VPG. Tell your friends, right? We're going with like basketball style nicknames, which by the way, I saw a tweet the other day. Basketball style nicknames are like terrible now. Like we just call people by like their names now. Like Kevin Durant's just KD. It's like whatever happened to like all of the awesome nicknames from like the 80s and 90s. And I was like, you know what? Not a basketball guy, but I think I get this. And so we need to bring back better nicknames, and I'm not helping with VPG. Anyway, so from a profile standpoint, I'm glad the Bills went from Mitch Morse to Connor McGovern and drafted VPG. But that's a really important skill. And I don't like going from I know he can do it to I hope he can do it.
That's fair. And of the moves that were made in terms of the guys that were cut and left the team, I think Mitch Morse was probably the one of that day where they made like 5 different cuts where I was like, that's a tough pill to swallow.
Still playing at a high level.
Yeah.
Where, it was just names for the rest
Trey
of
White, it was sad because you knew he was good. He was just hurt. With guys like Poyer and Hyde, you knew that was coming and stuff like that. With Morse, it was like, this dude still has stuff left in the tank, and I know why they did it, but they could have held on to him, and I would have been okay with it. But it's also clear that they had a plan in place. Whether or not that plan works, who knows? But I think it's also fair to say that even if Connor McGovern is good and a solid player, he's not going to be what Mitch Morse was, and it will be a certain downgrade. How big of a downgrade is up to debate, and I don't think it'll be so significant that we're going to be like, Mitch Morse, return to us. But I do think that it will change things, and it will change how they operate, but I think at the end of the day, they'll be fine. And especially considering you still have Aaron Kromer as your offensive line coach, I think that is what makes me feel more confident probably than anything else. So that's more or less where I stand on that. That is going to do it for us today. Thank you so much to Bruce for joining us tonight. Really, really appreciate it. I know I asked you at the last minute, but I really do appreciate you coming on. We'll probably have you on at some point again, either in the offseason or later on during the regular season. We'll be sure to have you back, and I'm glad you were able to join us tonight.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah. You can find Bruce on Twitter at Bruce Exclusive. You can find me at DFAUXY. Uber, where can the people find you?
At UberHansen on the Twitter. Yeah. Drunken rants always. I'm trying to just stir the pot as much as I possibly can every single day of the week.
You can, if you enjoyed this show, leave a comment, a like, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Cover One Fantasy, subscribe to Cover One College Football. Go hit like on this video, share it with your friends, enemies, lovers, and neighbors as well. We really appreciate all of you coming out and joining us tonight. If you want to support us more directly, there's Cover One Pass. $60 a year gets you access to all sorts of great content, both here on YouTube and in other places. You will also get to join our new Discord community. It is no longer on Slack. We're on Discord now, which is very, very weird every time Discord opens up on my computer. But we are on there, and it's a great time. Tons of people are on there, all sorts of different communities. We really appreciate all the support that you guys give us throughout the year. Go watch shows for the rest of the week. There's plenty of content throughout the rest of the week, and we're here to talk about the Bills through the rest of the year until training camp starts in July. Until next week, we will see you all then. That is it for us tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. Bye-bye.